Mission trips are amazing. When we go on mission trips and push ourselves outside of our comfort zone to go preach the gospel in a foreign land, it's just amazing. Oftentimes ourselves are just changed so much. We just see God in a new way and see ourselves and our life in a new way, and we just feel so alive. And we see so much fruit, and we see God moving, and we see God just partnering, us just partnering with God and just seeing him do so much. And oftentimes when we're on the missions trip, either a short-term or long-term trip, we'll make resolutions like, this is how I'm meant to live, and like, I'll never go back to my old American Christianity lifestyle. I'm going to live authentic, where I'm sharing the gospel wherever I go and seeing God do stuff. But oftentimes these resolutions we make, or commitments to live life differently, live a more authentic life for Christ, all kinds of seems to fall apart when we get back home. A few weeks after we get home from a missions trip, even if it was 6 months or if it was just a week, we fall back into our old routines. We stop looking for the one lost sheep to go find, and we just work our job and go to church and don't really live that life we were living on mission, where we were actively pursuing God in almost every moment of our day. And today I'd just like to talk to you guys about why this happens and why is it so hard to be an authentic Christian back home. So first, I'd like to just address two of the just ways that we often excuse this behavior of coming back home and then just becoming the old self and not continuing to live the life of authentic dedication to Jesus that we saw while we were overseas on missions. And the first is that we'll say to ourselves, well, there was just a special grace on missions. I don't think this is true, because God's always looking to save the lost. That's his heart, is for everyone to come to know him, to be saved by Jesus. So just because you're back in America doesn't mean that he doesn't want to save your neighbors. He wants to save them just as much as he wanted to save the child in Africa or the random stranger you talk to over in Asia. So that's not really a reason. And secondly, another reason we sometimes give is we say, well, God's just moving in other areas of the earth. He's not moving in our, hometown. He's not moving in America. He's moving in other places, and that's where we see revival, and that's why it's easy over there and hard here. And I don't think God is, he's not small. He doesn't have to have countries take turns to see God do stuff. He's moving everywhere. He's just waiting for us to be obedient. So both of these excuses, I don't really see them as reasons why. I think they're more excuses that we come up with. Because if you look at both of them, it's making God be the problem. God's not moving. God's not doing things. And I don't think God does that. I think God is always working, always wanting to see people come to him. I think we need to look at ourselves and our environment rather than God for the problem of why we find it so hard to come back to America and then continue sharing the gospel. So I'd like to just talk about 3 different areas that affect us, that at least from my experience and from the other people that I know that have gone on missions trips and been overseas and doing evangelism and doing missions, either short or long term, deal with these 3 areas that have a lot of influence on why is it so hard to come back and why it's so easy to slip back into the old ways. And the first is your environment. When you're overseas, you're in a completely different country. Most of the time they're speaking a language you don't even know, and you're kind of forced into trusting God for everything. When I was on a 3-month missions trip in Ukraine, ordering McDonald's was something that I had to trust God with, because I didn't speak the language very well, and hardly at all. So trying to get my burger, I had to be like, God, please help me to figure out how to speak correctly to these Ukrainians to get the food that I need and not end up with some weird thing or just have an awkward situation. And thus, everywhere I was going, I was constantly relying on God. I was so pushed out of my comfort zone by just being in a different country. I didn't feel at home there. I didn't feel any tug of familiarity just to do something the same way over and over and over again. There was nothing comfortable, nothing normal. I felt weird. I felt out of place. It was really easy to do street evangelism when everyone already was looking at me like the crazy American. You know, what does it really matter if he starts preaching? There wasn't much of a difference in how people responded to you. So it was just really easy to step out and be weird and be radical and not be normal, not look like I'm from where I was. And we too are called not just to be different in other lands, but the Bible talks about us being aliens, being not of this world, that our home is in heaven. That's how we're supposed to live, is dictated by the kingdom of God, bringing that to earth, not living from the culture that we were from. But as we go back to our nation, that's where we're from, that's where we feel comfortable, that's where we have all these familiarities of things that we feel, this is just the way I do things. You know, it's like going to get your coffee every morning. If you were in a foreign country, you'd be praying to God, figuring out, like, how do I do this? How do I figure this out? And then, like, because you're relying on him and pushed out of your comfort zone, you'd be constantly speaking to him and then his heart for the lost we conveyed to you as you talk to him, and it would be easier for you to see the one person you need to talk to while there. Whereas here in America, you just go through a drive-thru, you get the same coffee you always get. Maybe you say a nice word to the person at the register or something, but it's just like, it's routine, it's normal. There's a way that you feel like you have to act, and that doesn't involve sharing Jesus. That doesn't involve being weird for the gospel when it's here in America, because we just have this casual Christianity where you go on to church every Sunday and you don't be radical for Jesus. So that's one area that I just think really affects us, is just our environment. And the key to that is that we're supposed to be aliens wherever we are. We're supposed to view ourselves as citizens of heaven, which means we should be just as unashamed of being weird here in America, being countercultural here, as when it feels natural in another country. The second area that I think really affects us as we come home is just our team. When you're on a missions trip, you're usually with a group of people that are all there to share the gospel with you. They're all on mission. They're all on best behavior. They're all putting everything they can into this trip, into seeking God, into seeing God do things. And that can be very encouraging. You're with a bunch of people that are also on fire for Jesus, or at least they're trying to very hard. You also usually have leaders or other mature Christians around you to encourage you, to push you forward, to correct you when you're having a bad day or having a bad attitude. However, sadly, when we come home, and I love the Church of America, but oftentimes it is very broken, and there's a lot of people that need more help in the church than they can help other people. And thus, when we get home to a church, oftentimes we aren't surrounded with people who are pushing us forward, but we're surrounded by a lot of people who just come to Sunday morning. And it's not to blame them, and we should never blame them for how our actions happen, but we have a habit of regressing to the mean, to the average. And thus, when we come home, we're no longer surrounded by that group of people that are pushing us forward, and it becomes normal to be a Christian that just goes to church once a week and doesn't think about God the rest of the week. And thus, it becomes hard. So I just encourage all of you guys to think about that as you come home from missions, to think about finding other Christians that actually are on fire and developing relationships with them and continuing to push yourself forward. And I'd encourage you, even if you can't find anyone in your area where you normally live that's on fire for Jesus, God's there with you. And just because everyone else is being lazy or not engaging or just not being authentic in their Christian walk doesn't give us the right to sit back and watch the world just go to hell without Jesus. So engage, if you're by yourself, just trust God. He will be there with you. He's enough. You don't necessarily need people around you. We're told to seek out fellowship, but if you're alone, just seek out God and He'll send people your way. But if you're in a local church, seek out people that really are on fire for God and be with them. A great place to find this is like local outreaches. Usually most cities have them. I know in Minneapolis where I live, there's lots of outreaches that are going on. And when you're going out on the streets with other people, there's that bond you had while on a missions trip. And that's the place where you can find some really good fellowship that will really push you forward and raise the standard of what it means to be a Christian, like missions does, but back here in the States. And the last area and probably the most crucial that really affects us coming home and why it can be so hard to be authentic as we come back is just our mindset. When you're on mission, you've set this time apart. You've quit your job, or you've at least postponed your job. You've said goodbye to your friends and family for a while. You've cleared your mind. You've cleared your life. All your other worries, all your other things that you think you should be doing, you've put aside, and you're focused. You're going, this is my purpose for this amount of time, either it's a week or 6 months or 3 months or several years, is to do the work of the Father, to seek the kingdom, to see the kingdom come to earth, to see people saved, those that are in poverty taken care of, those that are needy taken care of. It's what you're doing for that time. It's what you're focused on. It's what you're making your life about, is God's work. And that's one of the reasons why we see so much fruit, is because we're being open. We're posturing ourselves in such a place while on mission that everything we do is about Jesus. And we're being very, very, very intentional about that as we go overseas, just by the nature of how it works. But oftentimes we come back, and God and the Great Commission and all this that we're doing when we were overseas has a tendency of becoming maybe a very important thing in our life, but still just one of the things in our life as we get back here. Now there's the family, and there's work, and there's all these other things that aren't wrong. We're actually supposed to do these things, be in our culture and work, and to have family and go to church and all these things. But they can't be the first thing, our main priority. And we need to do them all for the glory of God. But oftentimes when we come back, they usurp the place that God should have in our lives. And our mindset gets skewed. We start doing things for the wrong reason. We stop having everything be for the reason of Christ, and to see him glorified and to see people come to know him. So just with our mindset, we need to be intentional as we come back. As intentional as we were in missions. Doesn't matter what your job is, doesn't matter if you're in ministry or not in ministry or whatever you're doing. If you're overseas, if you're back here in America, we are put places by God, and God will use us wherever we are. No matter if you're at the office or you're behind a pulpit, God wants to speak through you and use you, and we need to have that mindset that we are on mission, just as much as we were in another country, in our job, in our family, in our community, back here. And have that mindset of waking up every day like we were on mission trip, going, God, what do you want to do today? What do you want to see happen? How can you use me to reach the lost? How can I get to know you more? How can I help others see who you are? So in conclusion, I'd just like to encourage all of you who have been on mission trips and gone places and seen God do stuff, but now come back and now have backslidden into your old ways, to just change your mindset. Be intentional about your environment and what you do. And put people in your life that also are following Christ in a radical way. And just put Christ first in everything you're doing, and make that a fresh start today. Just to dedicate everything you have to him. And if you're someone who's currently on missions or about to go into a missions trip, just remember that the hardest part of a missions trip usually is when you come home. It's the coming back to your old ways and trying to continue. So just prepare yourself for that as you're on missions trip, and try to be intentional while you're on missions to realize what you're doing, to realize how intentional you are while you're on the missions trip, so that you can continue to be doing those intentional things, like getting up early and praying and seeking him, or praying while you're in the car, or praying while you're going to places, and just being constantly in tune with him. And if you're someone who's never gone on a missions trip, this video wasn't saying don't go on missions because it's horrible and hard to come back. No, please. People need to hear the gospel, need to hear the gospel everywhere, both here and in other places, America and other countries. So please, if God's telling you to go, go. Preach the gospel, but just come back and preach the gospel here too. Thank you for watching the Frontline Update. If you like this video and want to hear more, please subscribe and click the notification bell. If you're interested in listening via podcast or would like to check out our blog, Visit frontlinemn.org for more information. We look forward to seeing you next week. The best is yet to be.